Welcome to the back room. Relax, unwind, and let our soothing gangster bedtime stories guide you into calm and peaceful sleep. Here we tell the quieter side of history, the childhoods, ambitions, and lives of legendary gangsters, without focusing on violence. As you settle in, share with us in the comments where you're listening from, what time it is right now, and one good thing that's happened to you today. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy our stories, please like this video to support the channel, and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Your encouragement helps us bring more Mafia bedtime stories to life. Now close your eyes, feel at ease, and enjoy tonight's story. Wishing you peace and the sweetest dreams.
The light in Guadalajara does not just illuminate, it dominates. It is a harsh, high-altitude sun that bleaches the color from the walls and forces shadows to retreat into the deepest corners of the courtyards. But on this afternoon in 1985, even the sun seems to have been brought to heel, its brilliance filtered through the expensive, amber-tinted glass of the hotel balcony, casting a warm, golden glow over the scene below. From this vantage point, high above the manicured gardens, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo looks down at his creation. He stands perfectly still, his hands resting lightly on the wrought iron railing. He is a slender man, elegant in a way that suggests not inherited wealth, but wealth acquired with great precision and kept with even greater discipline. His suit is tailored to the millimeter, the fabric dark and expensive, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. He does not look like a bandit. He does not look like a man who has ordered deaths or trafficked tons of narcotics. He looks like a diplomat. He looks like a president. Below him, the wedding reception is in full swing. It is a masterpiece of sensory excess. The air is thick with the scent of gardenias and roasting meat, layered with the complex, expensive perfumes of the women who move through the crowd like tropical birds. A string quartet plays a waltz, the music floating up to the balcony, sweet and orderly, masking the underlying tension that vibrates through the room. Crystal glasses clink. Laughter, polite and restrained, ripples through the gathering, but look closer. Look at the faces of the guests. There, sipping champagne, is the governor of the state, his smile a little too wide, his eyes darting nervously toward the balcony. Next to him, laughing at a joke, is the commander of the federal police, a man whose salary could not possibly pay for the watch on his wrist. And scattered among them, in suits that fit a little less perfectly, are men with hardened faces and restless hands, traffickers from Sinaloa, from Juarez, from Tijuana. They are natural enemies. In any other time, in any other place, they would be killing each other in the streets. But here, under this roof, they are guests. They are partners. They are part of a structure so vast, so unlikely, that it defies the laws of their violent nature. And they are all here because of the man on the balcony. Felix Gallardo does not need to shout to be heard. He does not need to wave a gun to be feared. His power is in his stillness. He is El Padrino, the Godfather, the architect of an impossible peace. He has done what no one thought could be done. He has taken the chaos of the Mexican drug trade, a world of feuds, vendettas, and petty banditry, and he has organized it. He has turned it into a corporation. As he watches the party, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touches his lips. It is not a smile of joy. It is a smile of satisfaction. It is the look of a man who has broken a wild horse and is now watching it trot in circles at his command. He believes he has tamed the scorpion. He believes he has rewritten the rules of the game. The psychological weight of this moment is crushing, though Felix bears it with an effortless grace. This is hubris in its purest form. He looks at the police commander and the trafficker clinking glasses and sees his own genius reflected back at him. He has bought the state. He has unified the criminals. He has created a pax mafiosa, a peace built on a foundation of cocaine and corruption. He turns from the railing and walks back into the cool shadow of the suite. The noise of the party fades, replaced by the hum of the air conditioning. The room is sparse, elegant, almost clinical. A desk, a phone, a map on the wall. This is where the real work happens. This is the control room of the machine. Most men in his line of work are driven by anger or by a desperate need for respect. Felix is driven by something colder, something more intellectual. He is driven by a desire for order. He despises the messiness of violence. He sees bloodshed not as a tool of power, but as a failure of management. If you have to kill someone, it means you didn't bribe them enough. It means you didn't negotiate well. He pours himself a glass of water from a crystal pitcher. His hand is steady. He takes a sip, savoring the coolness. He thinks about the men downstairs. They are wolves, he knows that. They are violent, unpredictable animals, but he holds the leash. He feeds them. He decides who eats and who starves. And as long as he keeps the bowls full, they will not bite the hand that feeds them. But there is a danger in thinking you can domesticate a wolf. There is a danger in believing that money can solve every problem. Felix Gallardo is a visionary, yes. He is a genius of logistics and strategy. But he is also a man standing on the summit of a mountain made of ice, and the sun is beating down. The string quartet transitions into a Mexican folk song, a corrido but played with classical instruments. It is a subtle nod to the roots of the men in the garden, a reminder of where they came from. The dusty hills of Sinaloa, the poverty, the hunger. Felix remembers the hunger. It is the engine that drives the machine. He remembers the feeling of having nothing, of being invisible. Now, he is the most visible man in Mexico, even if he prefers to stay in the shadows. He has stolen the sun, harnessed its power, and used it to grow an empire of poppies and marijuana. He walks back to the balcony. The sun is lower now, casting long shadows across the garden. The light has turned golden, rich, and heavy. The guests are drinking more, their voices getting louder, the laughter a little less polite. The wolves are starting to relax. Felix watches them. He knows their names, their weaknesses, their desires. He knows which ones are loyal and which ones are waiting for a moment of weakness. He is not afraid of them. He is the chess player and they are the pawns. But even a grandmaster can lose if he forgets that the board has edges. Even a godfather can fall if he believes his own myth too deeply. The scene is elegant, almost beautiful. The music, the flowers, the golden light. But underneath it all, there is a pulse of menace. It is the sound of a clock ticking. It is the sound of a dam holding back a river of blood. Felix Gallardo stands on his balcony, the king of all he surveys. He has brought order to chaos. He has turned crime into business. But as the sun begins to set, dipping below the horizon and surrendering the sky to the coming night, he cannot see the storm clouds gathering in the north. He cannot see the agent in the cornfield. He cannot see the betrayal that is already written in the stars. He is the most dangerous man in the room, yes, but he is also the most alone. And in the world he has built, loneliness is a fatal condition. The music swells, the glasses clink, the sun dies, and Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo turns his back on the light, stepping into the darkness that will eventually consume him, believing with tragic certainty that he is the one holding the candle. To understand the architecture of the empire, one must first examine the blueprints. And the blueprints of Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo's mind were not drawn in a criminal den, but in a police station. The story rewinds. The lush gardens of Guadalajara dissolve into the dust and heat of Sinaloa in the 1960s. This is a landscape of stark, brutal beauty. The Sierra Madre mountains loom in the distance, jagged and blue against the sky, hiding secrets in their deep ravines. Below, the flatlands bake under a relentless sun that turns the earth into powder. It is a place where poverty is not just a condition, it is the atmosphere. It hangs in the air like humidity, heavy and inescapable. In this world, the law is not a rigid line. It is a suggestion. It is a commodity to be bought, sold, and traded like cattle or corn. We see a young man standing on a street corner in Culiacan. He is tall, lanky, his uniform pressed with a precision that belies his meager salary. The badge on his chest gleams in the sun. He is a federal judicial police officer. In theory, he is a guardian of order. In practice, he is a gatekeeper. Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo did not join the police force out of a sense of civic duty. He joined because he was ambitious, and in Sinaloa, the police were the only ones who had access to both sides of the coin. They walked the line between the government and the narcos, taking tithes from both. The narration observes him closely. He is not like the other cops, brutish men who use their badges to steal fruit from vendors or extort pesos from drunks. Miguel is quiet. He is watchful. He has the eyes of a student. He is studying the mechanics of power. His true education begins when he is assigned as a bodyguard to the governor of Sinaloa, Leopoldo Sanchez Celis. This is his entrance into the finishing school of corruption. Inside the governor's palace, the air is cooler, smelling of floor wax and old paper. Here, Miguel stands in the background, a silent sentinel in the corner of the room. He watches, he listens. He sees the local drug lords, men with dirt under their fingernails and gold on their necks, coming to pay their respects. They bring suitcases. They bring envelopes. They sit with the governor, drinking tequila, laughing, making deals. He realizes a profound truth. The criminals and the politicians are not enemies. They are partners. The state does not want to stop the drug trade. It wants to manage it. It wants its cut. This realization is the spark that ignites his ambition. He sees that the real power does not lie in the badge, which is just a piece of metal. It lies in the envelope. It lies in the ability to facilitate, to connect, to smooth the friction between the law and the outlaw. The tone of this chapter is cynical, a deconstruction of authority. We see Miguel running errands for the governor, carrying messages that should not be written down, transporting packages that are never inspected. He is learning the value of discretion. He is learning that information is more valuable than ammunition. He begins to transform. The servant of the state is slowly, meticulously, becoming its manipulator. He stops seeing himself as a cop and starts seeing himself as a broker. He looks at the chaotic, violent world of the Sinaloa traffickers, the gameros who grow opium in the hills, and he sees inefficiency. They are fighting over scraps. They are killing each other for territory while the police and the politicians get rich off their labor. He sees a problem that needs a solution. He doesn't want to be a bandit hiding in the hills, sleeping with a rifle across his chest, waiting for the federals to come. That is a small life, a dangerous life. He wants to be the man who owns the hills. He wants to be the man who tells the federals where to go. His police training gives him a unique advantage. He understands logistics. He understands hierarchy. He understands how to build a system. The average narco thinks in terms of the next harvest, the next shipment. Miguel is learning to think in terms of quarters, of fiscal years, of infrastructure. We see him making his first moves, not with a gun but with a handshake. He uses his position to protect certain traffickers, to clear the road for them. In exchange, he asks for a percentage, but more than money, he asks for loyalty. He asks for order. "I can make the police go away," he tells them, his voice calm, reasonable. "But you have to listen to me. You have to stop the shooting. You have to get organized." It is a seductive pitch. The traffickers, tired of looking over their shoulders, begin to listen. They see the young policeman not as a threat, but as an asset. The packing of the chapter is deliberate, mirroring the slow, steady accumulation of influence. We see Miguel trading his uniform for a suit, though he keeps the badge in his drawer for a long time. It is a symbol of where he came from, and a reminder of how the system works. He establishes the intellectual foundation of his empire. He realizes that a cartel should not be a gang. It should be a government. It should have taxes, territories, and treaties. It should have a monopoly on violence, used only when necessary to enforce the rules. Miguel standing in the governor's office, looking at a map of Mexico on the wall. He is no longer the bodyguard. He is the partner. He traces the lines of the highways with his finger, seeing them not as roads but as arteries. He sees the potential for a flow of commerce that will dwarf anything the state can produce. The sun sets over Culiacan, turning the dust to gold. The young policeman has graduated. He has learned the most important lesson of all. The law is just a story we tell ourselves. And he is ready. Geography in Mexico is destiny. The deserts of Chihuahua, the ports of Veracruz, the border crossings of Tijuana, these were not just locations on a map, they were fiefdoms. They were plazas, ruled by warlords who treated their territories like sovereign nations. For decades, the history of the Mexican underworld was a history of feudalism. Neighbor fought neighbor. Plaza fought plaza. It was a war of attrition where the only winner was the grave. Until Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo walked into the room. The setting of this chapter moves away from the sun-baked streets into the shadows. We are in the smoky backrooms of haciendas, in the private dining rooms of restaurants in Guadalajara. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of tequila and leather. The tension is palpable, a physical weight that presses down on the chest. Imagine a room filled with tigers, men who have spent their lives killing to protect what is theirs. There is Pablo Acosta from Juarez, the Fox of Ojinaga, a man who rules the desert with a mythological status. There are the Arellano Felix brothers from Tijuana, young, violent, and arrogant. There is Juan Garcia Abrigo from the Gulf. And sitting with Felix are his closest allies. Ernesto Don Nito Fonseca Carrillo, the mentor, the old-school trafficker with the deep political connections. And Rafael Caro Quintero, the wild child, the genius who can make the desert bloom with marijuana but who cannot control his own temper. These men are natural enemies. They look at each other with suspicion, hands hovering near their waistbands. The silence is brittle, ready to shatter at the slightest provocation. Then Felix speaks. He does not speak like a gangster. He speaks like a visionary CEO. He stands at the head of the table, calm, immaculate, his eyes scanning the room not with fear, but with calculation. "We are fighting for crumbs," he tells them. His voice is low, steady. "We are killing each other for pennies while the Colombians make millions. We are letting the police play us against each other." He lays out his vision. It is a radical, terrifyingly simple idea: unification. "Imagine," he says, "if we stop fighting. Imagine if we coordinate. Tijuana takes the west. Juarez takes the middle. The Gulf takes the east. We set the prices. We control the supply. We become a single entity, a federation." He is pitching a business model of peace and profit. He is selling them the dream of stability. The narration explores the sheer difficulty of this task. Managing these egos is like juggling grenades. Rafa Caro Quintero is bored, flicking a lighter, wanting to go back to his fields. Don Nito is skeptical, eyeing the younger bosses with disdain. The others are wary, wondering if this is a trap. But Felix has something they don't. He has the connections. He has the governor in his pocket. He has the federal police commander on speed dial. He offers them not just a truce, but protection. State-sponsored protection. "You join me," he promises, and the raids stop. The trucks go through, the planes land. The tone is tense but diplomatic. We watch as Felix maneuvers, flattering one man, threatening another, mediating disputes with the patience of a saint. He is weaving a tapestry out of barbed wire. Slowly, miraculously, the tigers begin to retract their claws. They see the logic. They smell the money. The handshake replaces the gun. This is the birth of the Federation. It is an unprecedented alliance that turns the map of Mexico from a patchwork of war zones into a unified grid of commerce. The packing of the narrative becomes rhythmic, mirroring the steady, relentless expansion of Felix's influence. We see the lines on the map connecting. We see the flow of drugs streamlining. We see the profits multiplying. The emotional focus is on the seduction of order. For the first time in memory, the violence stops. The bodies disappear from the streets. The sirens go quiet. In their place is the hum of industry, trucks rolling north, cash flowing south. Felix stands in the center of it all, the architect of this new world. He has achieved the Pax Mafiosa. He has brought peace, but it is a peace built on a foundation of cocaine and corruption. It is a peace bought with blood money. We see him at the height of his powers. He is respected. He is feared. He is the man who tamed the beasts. He looks at his creation and sees perfection. He believes he has solved the puzzle of crime. He believes he has built something that will last forever. But as he toasts with his new partners, the clinking of glasses masking the underlying fragility of the alliance, we know the truth. A federation built on greed is a house of cards, and the wind is beginning to pick up. For now, though, the room is quiet. The deal is made. The architect has drawn his blueprints, and the construction of the nightmare has begun. If the unification of the plazas was the foundation, then what came next was the skyscraper. Until the early 1980s, the Mexican cartels were largely in the business of marijuana and opium. It was a high-volume, low-margin game. You grew it, you dried it, you trucked it. But down in the jungles of Colombia, the Medellin and Cali cartels were producing a different kind of commodity: white gold, cocaine. The Colombians had a problem. Their traditional routes through the Caribbean into Miami were being strangled by the U.S. Coast Guard and the DEA task forces. They were losing planes, boats, and pilots. They needed a backdoor into America. Enter Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo. The setting of the story expands dramatically. We leave the smoky backrooms and step out onto the tarmac. We are in the jungles of Central America or hidden airstrips in the deserts of Sonora. The sensory experience shifts. It is the roar of single-engine Cessna planes, their propellers biting into the humid air. It is the smell of high-octane aviation fuel, sharp and chemical. It is the sight of heavy canvas duffel bags being tossed from one vehicle to another, each thud representing a fortune. Felix Gallardo approached the Colombians not as a subordinate, but as a peer. He offered them the one thing they couldn't buy: geography. He offered them the 2,000-mile border between Mexico and the United States. But here is the stroke of genius that defines his legacy. The Colombians, desperate for a route, offered to pay him in cash, millions of dollars for every shipment. Most men would have taken the money and run. Felix said no. "I don't want your cash," he told them. "I want product." He demanded payment in kind. For every kilo he moved, he kept a percentage. This changed the economics of the trade overnight. Instead of being a paid courier, Felix became a distributor. He now owned a stake in the market. As the price of cocaine skyrocketed in the streets of New York and Los Angeles, so did his profits. He wasn't just earning millions, he was earning billions. The tone of the chapter becomes industrial and high stakes. We watch the transformation of the Federation into a logistics machine. It is the Amazon of the underworld. We see radar operators in remote Mexican outposts, sipping coffee, watching a blip appear on their screens. A plane coming from the south, unregistered, flying low. The operator picks up a phone, makes a call, and then turns a knob. The blip disappears. The sky is clear. We see trucks, hundreds of them, lined up at the border crossings in Tijuana and Juarez. They are carrying tomatoes, avocados, auto parts. But hidden in false bottoms, in gas tanks, in tires, is the white powder. The drivers wave to the customs agents. The agents wave back. The envelope has already been delivered. Felix Gallardo is portrayed not as a drug lord, but as a titan of industry. He sits in his office in Guadalajara, surrounded by phones and maps. He tracks shipments like a commodities trader. He manages supply chains, inventory, distribution networks. He is the Jeff Bezos of the cartel world, obsessed with efficiency. The packing of the narrative accelerates. The wealth pouring into Guadalajara is staggering. It distorts the economy. Hotels are built. Dealerships run out of luxury cars. The cartel members start buying Picassos and racehorses. It is a gold rush, a fever dream of excess. But beneath the champagne and the roar of the plains, a shadow is growing. You cannot move that much product. You cannot generate that much heat without attracting attention. The sheer scale of the operation begins to wake the sleeping giant to the north. In Washington, D.C., in the fluorescent-lit offices of the DEA, analysts are starting to see a pattern. They are seeing the shift from the Caribbean to the Mexican border. We introduce the growing sense of surveillance, the feeling that the sky is no longer empty. Satellites are repositioning. Listening posts are tuning in. The gringos are watching. Felix feels it. He is a man who has always survived by seeing around corners, and now his instincts are pricking. He stands on the tarmac of a private airfield, watching a plane take off into the sunset. The noise is deafening, a triumph of his engineering, but as the plane disappears into the clouds, he shivers. He has built a highway of cocaine that stretches from the Andes to the Rockies. He has become the wealthiest criminal in the history of Mexico, but he has also painted a target on his back the size of a continent. The highway is open, the traffic is flowing, but the toll booth is coming up and the price of passage is about to go up. Every story of light needs a shadow. Every story of a god needs a man who refuses to kneel. In the sprawling epic of the Guadalajara cartel, that man was Enrique "Kiki" Camarena. We leave the gilded ballrooms and private airstrips of Felix Gallardo and descend into a different reality. We find ourselves in the cramped, airless offices of the United States Drug Enforcement Administration in Guadalajara. It is a small outpost, underfunded and overwhelmed, a bureaucratic island in a sea of hostility. The air conditioning is broken. The fans push the hot, humid air around without cooling it. The desks are buried under mountains of paperwork, reports that no one reads, intelligence that no one acts on. Kiki Camarena is not an action hero. He does not wear a cape. He wears a cheap suit that is always slightly rumpled. He is a stubborn, frustrated man, driven by a quiet, burning sense of duty. He looks out the window at the vibrant, chaotic streets of the city, and he sees what others miss. He sees the rot beneath the paint. The tone of this chapter is foreboding. It is the feeling of walking down a dark hallway, knowing that something is waiting at the end, but having to keep walking anyway. We trace Camarena's investigation. It is not glamorous work. It is the tedious accumulation of facts. He talks to informants in back alleys. He digs through property records. He connects the dots that the Mexican police are paid to ignore. And slowly, a picture begins to emerge. He discovers the impossible. In the remote deserts of Chihuahua, hidden from the roads but visible from the sky, lies a plantation. It is not a few acres of marijuana. It is an industrial complex. Rancho Bufalo, a field of green gold that stretches for thousands of acres, tended by thousands of peasant farmers, guarded by the Mexican army. It is a harvest so massive it defies comprehension. It is estimated to be worth billions of dollars. Camarena realizes the scale of what he is up against. This is not just a criminal enterprise. It is a state within a state. The police commanders he drinks coffee with are on the payroll. The politicians who shake his hand are partners in the farm. He is shouting into a void, trying to wake up a government back in Washington that is more concerned with the Cold War than the drug war. The emotional focus is on Camarena's growing isolation. He knows he is being watched. He sees the cars parked down the street from his house. He hears the clicks on his telephone line. He looks at his wife, Mika, and his children, and he feels the cold grip of fear. But he cannot stop. He is a man possessed by the truth. The collision course between the untouchable Godfather and the relentless agent is set. Felix Gallardo sits in his high tower, believing he is immune. Camarena sits in his sweaty office, believing that the law still matters. The packing slows down to a crawl. The net is tightening, but it is not tightening around the cartel. It is tightening around Kiki. He organizes a raid. He pushes his superiors. He gets the coordinates. And then the impossible happens. The Mexican authorities, pressured by the undeniable evidence, raid Rancho Bufalo. They burn the fields. The smoke rises into the atmosphere, a black stain against the blue sky, visible for miles. It is a victory, a massive, undeniable blow to the Federation. Billions of dollars go up in smoke. But victories in this war have consequences. Felix Gallardo watches the fields burn on the evening news. His face is impassive, but his eyes are cold. This is not just a loss of money, it is a loss of face. It is an insult, and in his world, insults must be answered with blood. The atmosphere in Guadalajara changes. The air gets heavier. The smiles of the corrupt officials get tighter. Camarena feels the shift. He knows he has crossed a line. He tells his wife they need to leave. He requests a transfer. He is almost out. But almost is not enough. We feel the danger closing in on Kiki like a physical weight. The inevitability of the conflict hangs over the narrative. He is David standing against Goliath, but this Goliath doesn't just have a spear. He has the entire system behind him. It is a study in bravery against overwhelming odds. Camarena keeps working, keeps pushing, keeps believing that his badge means something. He walks through the valley of the shadow of death, his head held high, unaware that the shadow has already swallowed him. Kiki is walking to his car to meet his wife for lunch. The sun is shining. The street is busy. He is moments away from safety, but the car doors are opening. The men are stepping out. The agent in the cornfield has found the monster, and now the monster has found him. There are moments in history that act as pivot points, tectonic shifts, where the trajectory of events changes so violently that the world before and the world after bear no resemblance to one another. For the history of the drug war, for the nation of Mexico, and for the relationship between criminal empires and the states they parasitize, that moment began on a sunny afternoon in February 1985. It did not begin with a chaotic firefight in a dusty plaza. It began with a surgical removal. Enrique Kiki Camarena walked out of the American consulate to meet his wife for lunch. The sun was shining on the streets of Guadalajara. The traffic was moving. The city was alive with the mundane rhythm of a Tuesday. He was steps away from his car, steps away from safety, when 5 men approached him. They were not wearing masks. They were not hiding in the shadows. They wore the uniforms of the Mexican Intelligence Service, the DFS. They flashed badges that were real, worn by men who had sold their souls long ago. They spoke to him. There was a brief exchange, a flash of a gun barrel hidden under a jacket, and then Kiki was placed into a car. A beige Volkswagen. The door closed. The car drove away. It was seamless. It was professional. The silence of the witnesses on the street was the silence of a city that had learned the hard way that seeing is dangerous and speaking is fatal. They looked down. They kept walking. They let the earth swallow a man whole. Kiki was taken to a house at 881 Lope de Vega Street. It was an elegant residence in a wealthy neighborhood, surrounded by high walls covered in ivy and a manicured garden that smelled of jasmine. From the outside, it looked like the home of a successful doctor or a politician. Inside, it was about to become a chamber of horrors. This chapter is the darkest of the story. The narration must handle the events within those walls with extreme restraint. We do not need to dwell on the graphic mechanics of torture to understand the evil that took place. The human imagination is a far more effective instrument of terror than any description could be. What matters is the atmosphere, the claustrophobia, the absolute, crushing isolation of a man trapped in the belly of the beast he had been hunting. We describe the passage of time, 30 hours. 30 hours is an eternity. It is enough time for the sun to rise and set and rise again. It is enough time for hope to turn into bargaining, for bargaining to turn into despair, and for despair to turn into a cold, hard acceptance. Inside the house, the hierarchy of the Federation was present. This was not the work of low-level sicarios gone rogue. This was a board meeting of executioners. Rafael Caro Quintero was there, fueled by a blinding, incandescent rage over the loss of his marijuana plantation at Rancho Bufalo. He wanted vengeance. He wanted to hurt the thing that had hurt him. Ernesto Don Nito Fonseca Carrillo was there, perhaps wary, perhaps complicit, watching the young wolves lose control. And somewhere in the background, the shadow of Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo loomed. Was he in the room? Did he give the order? Or did he simply allow it to happen, washing his hands of the blood while reaping the benefits of the fear it would instill? The ambiguity of his presence makes him all the more terrifying. He is the ghost in the machine, the silence behind the screen. The interrogation was not about information. They knew everything Kiki knew. They had the transcripts of his reports. They knew the names of his informants. They knew the layout of the DEA office. No, this was not an intelligence-gathering mission. This was about power. It was about punishment. It was a message sent in flesh and bone to the United States government. We are untouchable. Your badge means nothing here. Your laws stop at the border. Here, we are the law. We explore the reaction within the cartel as the hours ticked by. The initial adrenaline of the abduction began to fade, replaced by a creeping, cold panic. The news was out. The DEA was screaming. The American ambassador was banging on the doors of the National Palace in Mexico City. Washington was awake, and it was angry. Did they realize what they had done? Did the fog of their hubris lift for a moment, allowing them to see the cliff edge they had just driven over? We focus on the confusion inside the house. Orders were given and countermanded. Blame was shifted in hushed whispers in the hallway. Was this Rafa's rash decision? Was it a situation that spun out of control, a monster that slipped its leash? The realization began to dawn on them that they had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They thought they were punishing a nuisance. Instead, they had kicked a hornet's nest the size of a continent. The packing of the narrative is agonizingly slow. We feel the weight of every minute. We are with Kiki in the darkness. We feel his physical pain, yes, but more than that, we feel the psychological torture of abandonment. He knows his colleagues are looking for him. He knows his wife is waiting. But he also knows, with the clarity of a professional, that the walls of 881 Lope de Vega are too thick, and the corruption of the city is too deep. No cavalry is coming. And then it ends. The doctor is called not to save him, but to keep him alive just a little longer, to prolong the suffering. It is the ultimate perversion of medicine. But eventually, the body gives out. Kiki Camarena dies. The silence that follows his death is heavier than the silence of the street. It is the silence of a storm holding its breath. The body is found weeks later, dumped by a roadside in a plastic bag, wrapped in tape, showing the signs of the hell he endured. The discovery unleashes a fury that the cartel could never have anticipated. This was not just a murder. It was an act of war. It was an assassination of a diplomatic figure. The United States launches Operation Leyenda, the largest manhunt in the history of the DEA. The sleeping giant is not just awake, it is enraged. The border is squeezed shut. Trade halts. The pressure on the Mexican government becomes unbearable. The politicians who drank Felix's wine now want his head on a platter to appease the gringos. The sun has set on the Guadalajara cartel. The golden age of impunity is over. The long night has begun. Felix Gallardo and his partners believed they were gods. They believed they could act without repercussion. They believed the rules of the world did not apply to them. But in the silence of that house on Lope de Vega, they sealed their own fate. They killed a man, but they birthed a martyr. The ghost of Kiki Camarena would rise from that plastic bag. It would walk through the halls of Washington and the streets of Mexico. It would hunt them down, one by one, chasing them into prison cells and early graves. The 30 hours of darkness did not bury the truth. It planted a seed that would grow into a forest of ruin for the men who thought they owned the sun. When a stone is thrown into a still pond, the ripples move outward in predictable, concentric circles. But when a boulder is dropped into a dam, the result is not a ripple, it is a flood. The murder of Kiki Camarena was that boulder, and the dam holding back the wrath of the United States had just shattered. The aftermath was immediate and apocalyptic. The United States government did not just investigate, they retaliated. In a move unprecedented in diplomatic history, they effectively shut down the border. Every truck, every car, every pedestrian crossing from Mexico into the U.S. was stopped and searched. The economic artery between the two nations was severed. The produce of Sinaloa rotted in the sun. The auto parts factories in Detroit halted lines for lack of supplies. The economy of Mexico began to seize up, a heart attack induced by the sheer pressure of American anger. The message from Washington was clear: give us the killers or we will strangle you. Inside the halls of power in Mexico City, panic set in. The politicians who had profited from Felix Gallardo's generosity, the police commanders who had looked the other way, suddenly found themselves in the crosshairs. The protection Felix had bought with millions of dollars evaporated overnight. He was no longer an asset. He was a cancer. He was a liability that threatened the stability of the state itself. The narration describes the atmosphere of chaos within the cartel. The Federation, that masterpiece of unity, began to fracture under the stress. It was every man for himself. First to fall were the loud ones, Rafael Caro Quintero. The hothead who had ordered the kidnapping fled to Costa Rica with his socialite girlfriend, believing he could buy his way into a new life. But the DEA was relentless. They hunted him down, dragging him back in chains to face a justice he thought he was above. Don Nito, the old lion, was cornered in Puerto Vallarta, his political connections useless against the tidal wave of pressure. But the biggest prize, the head of the snake, was still out there. Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo was forced into the shadows. We see the Godfather stripped of his court. The hotel balconies and the parties are gone. He is moving from safe house to safe house, living out of suitcases, sleeping with one eye open. The walls are closing in. The tone of the chapter is paranoid and claustrophobic. We explore Felix's isolation. The man who had united the warring tribes was now alone. He reached out to his contacts in the government, the men he had made rich, and found only dead air. Phone numbers were disconnected. Meetings were canceled. The doors that had always been open were now bolted shut. He was toxic. To be seen with him was political suicide. In the vacuum of his leadership, the wolves began to circle. The lieutenants he had empowered, the young, hungry men he had placed in charge of the plazas, began to smell blood in the water. Amado Carrillo Fuentes in Juarez, the lord of the skis, watched the chaos with calculating eyes, planning his own ascent. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman in Sinaloa saw an opportunity to step out of the shadow of his boss. The Arellano Felix brothers in Tijuana, arrogant and violent, began to fortify their own fiefdom. The order Felix had built was dissolving back into chaos, but this time, it was a chaos he could not control. The Pax Mafiosa was dead. The loyalty that held the Federation together had been replaced by the instinct for survival. We see Felix sitting in a darkened room in a house in the suburbs of Guadalajara. The blinds are drawn. The air conditioning hums a monotonous tune. He looks at a map on the table, but the lines are blurring. He realizes that the empire he built is slipping through his fingers like sand. He is still the smartest man in the room, but the room has gotten very small. He tries to maintain control. He issues orders. He moves money. He tries to negotiate with the government, offering up scapegoats, offering more money. But the currency has changed. The only thing that can buy the government's survival now is his head. The packing of the chapter accelerates, mirroring the frantic scramble. It is a hunt. The DEA agents, fueled by the memory of their fallen brother, are tearing the country apart to find him. They are kicking down doors, squeezing informants, burning the haystack to find the needle. Felix Gallardo, the man who stole the sun, is now afraid of the light. He moves only at night. He trusts no one. He sees betrayal in every face. The hubris of the first chapter has been replaced by the cold, hard reality of the fugitive. He is no longer a head of state, he is prey. As the chapter ends, we feel the net tightening. The circle of safe houses is shrinking. The list of allies is empty. The wrath of the North is a storm that cannot be weathered, only endured until it destroys everything in its path. And standing in the center of the storm, alone and exposed, is the Godfather, waiting for the lightning to strike. There is a final act in the tragedy of every king, a moment where he must confront the mortality of his reign. For Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, that moment came in 1989, in a house overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Acapulco. The setting is deceptively tranquil. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below provides a rhythmic, soothing backdrop to a meeting that would define the next 30 years of bloodshed in Mexico. The air smells of salt and hibiscus. The light is soft, filtered through the linen curtains. But inside the room, the atmosphere is heavy with the scent of endings. Felix Gallardo sits at the head of the table. He looks tired. The immaculate suits are still there, the hair still slicked back, but the eyes are haunted. He knows his time is running out. The DEA is closing in. The Mexican government has abandoned him. He is a man standing on a burning bridge, looking for a way to save the cargo before the structure collapses. Around the table sit the lieutenants. They are the next generation, the wolves he raised. There is Amado Carrillo Fuentes, quiet and watchful, his mind already calculating the logistics of the skis. There are the Arellano Felix brothers, Benjamin and Ramon, radiating a restless, violent energy. There is Juan Jose Esparragoza Morno, El Azul, the diplomat. And there are the Sinalones, Hector El Guero Palma, and a short, stocky man named Joaquin Guzman Loera, El Chapo. They are young. They are hungry. They are waiting for the old lion to fall so they can feast on the carcass. Felix knows this. He is not naive, but he still believes he is the smartest man in the room. He believes he can outmaneuver his own obsolescence. He speaks. His voice is calm, devoid of the panic that must be clawing at his insides. He lays out the reality of the situation. The Federation, as a unified entity, is dead. It is too big, too visible, too much of a target. To survive, the organism must split. It must undergo mitosis. "I am dividing the plazas," he announces. It is a statement of immense consequence. He is carving up the map of Mexico like a roast chicken. "Tijuana goes to the Arellanos," he says. "You control the border, the most valuable crossing in the world." Benjamin Arellano nods, a shark-like smile touching his lips. "Juarez goes to the Carrillo Fuentes family," Felix continues. "You control the center, the warehouses, the air." Amado remains impassive, but his eyes gleam. "Sinaloa," Felix says, looking at Chapo and Palma, "goes to you, the production, the coast, the heart." And so it goes. The Gulf, the Pacific, the roots, the territories. The tone of the scene is almost biblical. It is King Lear dividing his kingdom among his daughters, or Alexander the Great on his deathbed, leaving his empire to the strongest. It is an act of creation and destruction simultaneously. We explore the psychology of this decision. Why did he do it? Was it a desperate attempt to save the business, to compartmentalize the risk so that if one plaza fell, the others would survive? Was it a way to buy their loyalty one last time, to give them what they wanted so they wouldn't turn him in? Or was it something darker? Was it a final act of spite? Did he know deep down that by removing the central authority, he was unleashing chaos? Did he know that without him to referee the disputes, these men would tear each other apart? Felix believes he can still rule from the shadows. He envisions himself as the chairman of the board, sitting in a prison cell or a hideout, pulling the strings while these men do the work. He thinks they will still kick up to him. He thinks they will still respect the Godfather. It is a delusion of grandeur. It is the hubris of a man who cannot accept that he is no longer necessary. We look at the faces of the future kingpins. They accept their inheritance with solemn nods, but behind their eyes, the calculations are already running. They don't see themselves as regional managers in Felix's corporation. They see themselves as kings of their own nations. They are not thinking about kicking up. They are thinking about expansion. This moment births the modern cartel landscape. The seeds of the Tijuana cartel, the Sinaloa cartel, the Juarez cartel, they are all planted in this room, watered by Felix's desperation. The rivalries that will turn cities like Juarez and Tijuana into slaughterhouses are forged in this division. The meeting ends. The men stand up. There are handshakes, embraces, the Judas kisses of the underworld. They walk out into the Acapulco sun, squinting against the light, carrying the keys to their new kingdoms in their pockets. Felix Gallardo remains alone in the room. He walks to the window and looks out at the ocean. He feels a sense of accomplishment. He has reorganized the board. He has saved the game. But he has made a fatal error. He assumed that the game would continue to be played by his rules. He didn't realize that he had just handed the pieces to men who would burn the board. By dividing the empire, he hasn't saved it. He has guaranteed a future of endless war. He has created a multipolar world of violence where no one is strong enough to enforce the peace, but everyone is strong enough to start a war. The waves crash against the rocks, a relentless, eroding force. The sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the water. The era of the Godfather is over. The era of the warlords has begun. And as the darkness gathers in the corners of the room, Felix Gallardo stands alone, the architect of his own obsolescence, watching the tide come in to wash away his footprints. The end of a legend is rarely as loud as its beginning. For Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the man who stole the sun, the eclipse came not with a bang, but with a whimper. It is April 8, 1989. The location is a nondescript house in Guadalajara, not a fortress, just a house. There is no shootout, no last stand with a golden pistol, just a knock on the door, a sudden swarm of police, men he once might have commanded, and the click of handcuffs. It is a betrayal, of course. The protection he thought he still had was an illusion. The state, needing a sacrifice to appease the gods of the north, offered him up. He is taken to Altiplano, the maximum security prison that sits like a concrete scar on the high plains of Mexico. The gates close, the heavy steel doors slam shut, and the world shrinks. We enter the sensory deprivation of his confinement. The air is cold, filtered, smelling of industrial cleaner and unwashed bodies. The light is artificial, a fluorescent hum that never truly sleeps, bleaching the color from his skin. The silence is profound, broken only by the echo of footsteps on the gantry or the distant clang of a lock. The man who owned the sun is now living in a box measuring 3 meters by 4. The tone of the chapter shifts to a meditative, claustrophobic study of decay. We watch the decades pass through the prism of this cell. The 1990s, the 2000s, the 2010s, while the world outside accelerates, spinning faster and faster into the digital age, time in Altiplano drags like a heavy chain. Felix Gallardo ages. The sharp features soften. The dark hair turns gray, then white, then thin. The posture, once regal, begins to stoop. He becomes a frail old man, shuffling around his cell, wrapped in a sweater against the perpetual chill. His only window to the world he created is a small television set. He watches. He sees the seeds he planted in Acapulco bloom into forests of fire. He sees the Tijuana cartel war with the Sinaloa cartel. He sees the rise of Amado Carrillo Fuentes, who takes the logistics empire Felix built and turns it into a fleet of 727 jets. He sees the brutality of the Zetas. He sees the war on drugs turn into a literal war, with soldiers in the streets and heads rolling on dance floors. He sees his former lieutenants, Chapo, Mayo, Benjamin, become global celebrities, their names spoken with a mixture of fear and awe that was once reserved for him. And he realizes with a bitter, crushing clarity that he is irrelevant. He is a ghost, a relic of a bygone era. The young sicarios on the news don't know who he is. They don't know that he built the roads they drive on. They don't know that the structure of their lives was designed by the old man rotting in cell 1. He tries to assert himself. He writes letters, not orders to hit squads but complaints to human rights commissions. He complains about the cold. He complains about the food. He complains about his health. His hearing is going. His eyes are failing. His body is riddled with ailments. The prose is pathetic. The whining of a man who once commanded armies now reduced to begging for an extra blanket. The Godfather has become a litigant. The packing of the chapter is deliberately slow, mirroring the agonizing passage of prison time. A day is a year. A year is a lifetime. We feel the weight of the boredom, the crushing sameness of the routine. We contrast his grand ambition with his pathetic reality. He wanted to be a statesman. He wanted to be remembered as a visionary. Instead, he is remembered, if he is remembered at all, as the man who killed Kiki Camarena. That single act of violence, the one he may not have even ordered, defines him. It is the stone around his neck that drags him to the bottom. He sits on his bunk, staring at the wall. Does he feel guilt? Does he feel remorse? Or does he only feel the injustice of his fall? Does he replay the wedding in 1985 in his head, trying to find the moment where it all went wrong? He is trapped in a cage of silence. The phone doesn't ring. The visitors don't come. The world has moved on, leaving him behind like a piece of driftwood on a deserted beach. It is a study in the hollowness of power. Power is a borrowed thing. It belongs to the chair, not the man. And once you stand up, once the handcuffs go on, the power evaporates, leaving you shivering in the cold, wondering why you ever thought you could hold the sun in your hands. The light buzzes. The guard walks by, not even glancing into the cell. And Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the architect of the modern drug trade, closes his eyes and waits for the end. A king without a kingdom, a father without a family, a man without a name. History is not a line, it is a circle. It turns and turns, grinding the bones of the past to make the dust of the future. And as we stand at the end of the story of Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, we must look not at the man, but at the world he left behind. We look at the map of Mexico today. It is no longer the unified grid of commerce that Felix envisioned in his hotel room. It is a fractured, bleeding landscape. The lines he drew on the map have become trenches. The plazas he divided have become killing fields. The legacy of the Godfather is not a corporation. It is a graveyard. To understand the magnitude of his tragedy, one must look at the numbers. Hundreds of thousands dead. Tens of thousands disappeared. Los desaparecidos. The ghosts who walked out the door one morning and dissolved into the air. Families searching the desert with shovels, looking for a bone, a button, a scrap of fabric that proves their loved one existed. This is the inheritance. Felix Gallardo wanted to bring order to crime. He wanted to civilize the underworld. He believed that if you applied the principles of business to the trade of narcotics, you could eliminate the violence. He thought he could put a suit on the devil and invite him to dinner. But he was wrong. You cannot civilize a beast that feeds on human misery. By organizing the cartels, by pumping them full of billions of dollars and connecting them to the apparatus of the state, he didn't tame the monster. He gave it steroids. He gave it armor. He gave it the strength to challenge the state itself. We look at the modern cartels, the Zetas, the Jalisco new generation. They do not operate with the discretion Felix prized. They operate with terror. They hang bodies from bridges. They release videos of beheadings. They rule not through corruption alone, but through military occupation. This evolution traces directly back to the decision in Acapulco. When Felix divided the empire, he created a competitive market for violence. He created an arms race. To survive in the post-Felix world, you didn't need to be the smartest. You needed to be the most brutal. You needed to be the most terrifying. The narration pulls back to view this tragedy on a macro scale. It is a story of unintended consequences. Felix wanted to build a legacy of power. Instead, he built a legacy of sorrow. He wanted to be the man who owned Mexico. Instead, he became the man who broke it. We return now, in our mind's eye, to the beginning. The hotel balcony in Guadalajara, 1985. The sun is shining. The string quartet is playing a waltz. But the scene has changed. The memory is tainted by the knowledge of what followed. The music is dissonant now, out of tune, a screeching melody that grates on the nerves. The golden light has faded into the color of a bruise. Look at the guests. The governor, the police commander, the traffickers. They are no longer men in suits, they are ghosts. They are skeletons clinking glasses filled with blood. We see them not as they were, but as they ended. Don Nito rotting in prison. Rafa a fugitive hunted like an animal. Amado dead on an operating table. Chapo buried alive in a supermax. The Arellanos dead or caged. And standing above them all, watching the macabre dance, is Felix Gallardo. But he is not the elegant diplomat anymore. We cut to the present day. The cell in Altiplano, or perhaps the hospital wing of the Puente Grande prison. It is quiet here. The air smells of antiseptic and old age. Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo sits in a wheelchair. He is deaf in one ear, blind in one eye. His body is failing him, ravaged by pneumonia and the slow decay of confinement. He holds a tablet with shaking hands, perhaps reading the news, perhaps just staring at the glow. He recently gave an interview, his first in decades. He sat there, a fragile, broken thing, and told the world that he was a simple man, a farmer. He claimed he didn't know these men, Chapo, Amado. He claimed the Guadalajara cartel never existed. It was the final act of gaslighting, a denial of reality so profound it bordered on madness. Or perhaps it was the only way he could sleep. Perhaps to acknowledge his role would be to invite the ghosts into the cell with him. To admit that he was the architect would be to accept responsibility for the river of blood that has drowned his country. So he lies. He lies to the reporter. He lies to himself. He retreats into the senility of denial. But history does not care about his denials. The record is written in the earth. We see him closing his eyes. Does he see the poppy fields? Does he see the planes taking off? Or does he see the face of Kiki Camarena, the man whose death signaled the end of the dream? He wanted to be immortal, and in a terrible way he is. He is the patient zero of the drug war. As long as there is a cartel in Mexico, as long as there is a shipment crossing the border, his DNA is there. He is the father of the nightmare. The screen begins to darken. The image of the old man in the wheelchair fades, swallowed by the shadows of the prison he will never leave. He is a king of nothing, ruling over a memory of a sun that set a long time ago. And then the sound. Rain. It starts softly, a gentle patter against the roof. Then it grows louder, a steady, rhythmic drumming. We see the rain falling on the dry earth of Sinaloa. It falls on the streets of Guadalajara. It falls on the border fence in Tijuana. It falls on the unmarked graves in the desert. It washes the dust from the wooden crosses. It creates rivulets of water that run through the streets where the blood was spilled. The rain is indifferent. It does not judge the sinner or the saint. It simply falls, washing the world clean, preparing the soil for whatever will grow next. But the stain is deep. It has seeped into the bedrock. No amount of rain can wash away the legacy of Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo. The screen is black now. There is only the sound of the water. It is a lonely, mournful sound. It is the sound of a country weeping for its children. It is the sound of the deep sleep of history, covering the dead with a blanket of silence. And in that silence the story ends, but the echo lasts forever.